all the saints in the Catholic Church, the one most known and loved by people all over the world is Saint Francis of Assisi. We celebrated his feast on the 4th of October, which happened to be a Sunday, and on this day, two very special events took place. Our Pope, who was the first of all popes to choose Francis as his papal name, went to Assisi and beatified Carlo, or Charles Acutis, who died as recently as 2006, 15 years old, who used his skills as a computer programmer to teach countless persons and to spend whatever he earned on the poor. He was highly devoted to Saint Francis of Assisi. The Pope also signed his third encyclical, Tutti, Fratelli, a remarkable document that has been seen as throwing much light on what we all over the world are going through. It has been, not unexpectedly, very well received even by a very secular world and given much prominence in the media. Our parish then will do as has been advised by many. We will not only read Tutti Fratelli, but also reflect and pray over it. Its matter is inexhaustible.
Been any major criticism of the Pope's encyclical, it is with regard to its title. It should have been not Tutti Fratelli, but Tutti Fratelli et Sorelle. That is, not all our brothers, but all our brothers and sisters. But it must be kept in mind that the original Tutti Fratelli comes from Saint Francis himself, and in the idiom of his time, it included into fellowship both males and females. What is to be noticed about the Pope's encyclical is that in the Tutti, the all are not only human beings, but also everything in nature or God's creation. The care of nature is as important as the care of human beings. The inspiration of Tutti Fratelli, like also that of the encyclical Laudato Si, comes from Saint Francis, who, for example, in his great Canticle of the Sun, while addressing the sun and the wind and fire as brother, addresses the moon and the water as sister and the earth as mother. The breadth and universalism of the Pope's encyclical have been very well received because in it, ecology is seen as important as spirituality for the formation of any human being. The air and wind, hills and rivers, fields, trees and plants, and all things of nature can't provide us if to them we do not bestow our care.
If Pope Francis has been so well received by all nations and listened to with great respect by people of other faiths, it is because of what he states plainly at the start of his encyclical. In these pages of reflection, on universal fraternity, I felt inspired particularly by Saint Francis of Assisi. In the early Middle Ages, when Christian European nations were in a crusading war with Muslim kingdoms, Saint Francis, with all the hampering conditions of a life of poverty and spirit, undertook a difficult journey to dialogue with the Sultan of Egypt about the nature of the divine and about the creation of peace and mutual understanding among the warring parties. He was later to instruct his missionary friars that they were not only to lose their identity, but also not to engage in arguments or disputes, but to be subject to every human creature for God's sake. It is this spirit of dialogue that makes it possible for the present Pope to confess that he is inspired to write Tutti, Fratelli, not only by his patron saint and Charles de Foucault, but also by others of our brothers and sisters who are not Catholics: Martin Luther King, Desmond Tutu, Mahatma Gandhi, and many more. It is not to be wondered at that the Pope, during his visits to Roman prisons, kissed the feet of Muslim inmates, and on going to an island where there were refugees, he brought to Rome only Muslim refugees and gave them quarters. That's why, on his recent visits to Egypt, the Emirates, and Turkey, he was received with great respect and affection even. It is this spirit of openness that the encyclical that is going to be positively influencing how we deal with people of other faiths.
Various zones will be dealing with different chapters of the encyclical. Our Zone 1 will briefly highlight today the main points of chapters 1, 3 and 4. In chapter 1, Dark Clouds over a Closed World. This is how Pope Francis starts his encyclical, laying out his main purpose for writing it. Fratelli Tutti. With these words, Saint Francis of Assisi addressed his brothers and sisters and proposed to them a way of life marked by the flavor of the gospel. Of the counsels Francis offered, I've selected the one in which he calls for love that transcends the barriers of geography and distance, and declares blessed all those who love their brothers and sisters as much when they are far away from him as when they are with him. In his simple and direct way, Saint Francis express the essence of a fraternal openness that allows us to acknowledge, appreciate, and love each person, regardless of physical closeness, regardless of where he or she was born or lives. This saint of fraternal love, simplicity, and joy, who inspired Pope Francis to write the encyclical Laudato Si, prompted the Pope once more to devote this new encyclical to fraternity and social friendship. Francis felt himself a brother to the sun, the sea, and the wind. Yet he knew that he was even closer to those of his own flesh. Wherever he went, he sowed seeds of peace and walked alongside the poor, the abandoned, the infirm, and the outcast, the least of his brothers and sisters.
In chapter 3, The Vision of an Open World, there are wide-ranging plans to be laid out. But if there are plans, all human beings are to be included. No category of them to be left out. This is what the Pope says. The best way to dominate and gain control over people is to spread despair and discouragement. Employing a strategy of ridicule, suspicion, and relentless criticism. In a variety of ways, one denies the rights of others to exist or to have an opinion. Their share of the truth and their values are rejected, and as a result, the life of society is impoverished and subjected to the pride of the powerful. We are growing ever more distant from one another, while the slow and demanding march towards an increasingly united and just world is suffering setbacks. To care for the world in which we live means to care for ourselves. Yet we need to think of ourselves more and more as a single family dwelling in a common home.
A Heart Open to the World is the title of chapter 4. He lays out the bare fact that human rights are universal, but they are not respected. He says the organizations of societies worldwide is still far from reflecting clearly that women possess the same dignity and identical rights as men. We say one thing with words, but our decisions and realities tell another story. Even though the international community has adopted numerous agreements and launched various strategies aimed at ending slavery in all its forms, yet children, women, and men of all ages are deprived of freedom. and forced to live in conditions akin to slavery. Whether by coercion or deception, or by physical or psychological threats, human persons created in the image and likeness of God are deprived of their freedom, sold and reduced to being the property of others. Trafficking in person and other contemporary forms of enslavement are a worldwide problem. Efforts to eliminate this phenomenon also demand a common and indeed a global effort on the part of various sectors of the society.
We will conclude with a prayer that Pope makes at the end of Tutti, Fratelli. A prayer to the Creator. Lord, Father of all human beings, equal in dignity, pour forth into our hearts a fraternal spirit and inspire in us a dream of renewal encounter, dialogue, justice and peace. Move us to create healthier society and a more dignifying world, a world without hunger, poverty, violence and war. May our hearts be open to all the peoples and nations of the earth. May we recognize the goodness and beauty that you have sown in each of us, and thus forge bonds of unity, common projects, and share dreams in God.